I was 23 years old when I stopped praying for him. I remember the exact morning. I was kneeling on the hard floor of a chapel that did not belong to my pack, in a village whose name I had chosen because no one there would know mine. And I realised I had been mouthing the words for almost an hour, without meaning any of them. The cold from the stones had moved up through my knees and settled into my bones, and the prayer I had said every night for 3 years no longer fit in my mouth. Bring him back to me. I stopped, mid-syllable. I listened to the silence, and I understood, with the dull clarity of someone naming a fever that has finally broken, that I did not want him back. I wanted to want him back. That was a different country, and I had been living in it for a long time. I stood up. My knees ached. I left the chapel. I was 20 when he turned me away. The mating ceremony of the Iron Territories is held at the autumn moon in the great open courtyard of the fortress, beneath a sky that has been cleared by the priests for the wolf light to fall directly on the bonded pair. Every pack in the north sends its eligible. The Alpha King stands on the dais. His wolf chooses. Politics may afterward complicate the choice. The wolf cannot lie. That is the tradition. That is what every child of the north is told. I was the daughter of a minor pack's healer. I should not have been there. My father had been called to attend a noblewoman who had taken ill in the procession, and I had come with him to carry his satchel, because he did not yet trust me with patients on my own. I wore my mother's brown wool. My hair was braided in the plain way. I had not even meant to enter the courtyard. I was crossing the back of the great hall, satchel against my hip, when the king's wolf turned his head toward me. Every wolf in the courtyard turned with him. I have been told since that I should have known then what was about to happen. I did not. I had no frame for it. I thought I had walked into a private moment by accident. I tried to step back through the doorway, and a hand caught my elbow, gently, almost apologetic, and a steward I did not know was guiding me forward through the parted crowd, toward the dais. And the king was coming down the dais steps toward me. And I was 20 years old, and I had never been looked at in my life. His eyes were the grey of riverstone after rain. He stopped 1 pace from me. His mouth moved like he was searching for a word he had not used in years. Behind him, on the dais, a noblewoman in silver was watching with an expression I would later understand had been the entire shape of the evening. The daughter of the Southern Alliance, chosen by the council, dressed for the announcement, denied by the wolf in front of her. He looked at me, I looked at him, and I felt, for one impossible heartbeat, that I had finally been seen. Then he stepped back. He stepped back, and he turned to the courtyard, and he said the formal refusal in a voice that did not belong to him. He said it twice, because the first time the priests did not believe him. He took the wolf iron pendant the steward had been ready to place around the bonded pair, and he placed it instead around the neck of the noblewoman in silver, who had not moved, whose face had not changed, and his hand closed around the metal as if she had been waiting for it all night. I do not remember walking out. I remember being in the corridor, and then in the courtyard, and then in the road, and then in a forest I did not recognise. I remember my father finding me at dawn, at the foot of a tree, and the sound he made when he saw my face. I remember the long ride south, to a village he had a cousin in. I remember the months it took for the bond he had refused to stop trying to kill me through the mark on my own wrist. Then I remember choosing to live. That is the part most people skip. The decision to live, after rejection, is not a single decision. It is 1,000 small ones, every morning, for a year. You put on the dress. You eat the bread. You learn the new villagers' market. You learn the new villagers' accents. You let your hair grow out of the braid because it was a healer's daughter's braid, and you are not a healer's daughter anymore. You become a midwife to a town that does not know your name. You become useful. You become, slowly, someone you would have liked to know 3 years ago, when you were standing in a courtyard waiting to be seen. By the time I stopped praying for him, I had become her. The woman he turned away no longer existed, and the woman who had taken her place did not pray. I had been a midwife in Hollowbrook for 2 years when the rumours began. A man was travelling the north, tall, dark-haired, with eyes the colour of riverstone. He was not announcing himself. He was asking quiet questions in market squares and at inn doors. He was looking for someone. The descriptions of the someone varied. A healer's daughter, a young woman with a long brown braid, a girl from a small pack near the Eastern Ridge. But they were close enough to me that 2 of the older midwives began watching the road on the days the post came in. I told them I did not know who he was. I told myself the same thing. He came in autumn. The leaves were turning along the river. I was returning from a berth at one of the outlying farms, my satchel heavy on my shoulder, the dawn cold enough to bite, and I crested the rise into the village square, and I saw him before he saw me. He was standing at the well. He was in plain, dark wool, no insignia, no guard. He looked thinner than I remembered. He was speaking quietly to the innkeeper's wife, who was answering with her hands. He turned, casually, the way a man turns when he is finishing a conversation, and the morning sun caught his face, and I knew him. I did not stop walking. I had practiced this. Not him specifically, but the principle of him. I had practiced in my own head, in the chapel, on the road, at the bedside of mothers I would not be able to save, and mothers I would. The principle was, a woman who has built a life does not run from someone who once chose to ignore her. She walks past him. If he speaks, she answers. If he does not speak, she keeps walking, and the day continues, because the day has its own business. I walked. I was 3 steps from the well when his head turned again, slowly, the way a wolf turns when something has reached him that he cannot yet name. I saw it happen. I saw the moment his shoulders went still. I saw the innkeeper's wife notice and step away. He did not say my name. He said, "Forgive me." Quiet. Not toward me, toward the air between us, as if to say it any louder would be presumption. I did not stop. I did not turn my head. I said, in the easy voice of a midwife greeting a stranger at the well, "Good morning." I walked past him. I did not look back. I made it to my door. I went inside. I set my satchel down. I sat on the bench by the cold hearth, and I put my hands flat on my knees, and I breathed the way the older midwives had taught me to breathe when a birth goes sideways. In, hold, out. In, hold, out. I did not cry. I had done all of that years ago, but my wrist, where the bond mark had once burned itself raw, ached as if winter had come back into it. He came to my door at midday. I was expecting him by then. I had expected him from the moment I crossed my threshold. The only question had been how long he would give me before he asked. He knocked. Once. Then waited. I opened the door because I had decided I would. Not because he had earned the door, because I wanted to look at him in daylight, on a threshold I owned, and see whether the man at the well was the same one who had stepped back on the dais. He was, and he was not. His face was older. There was grey at one temple I did not remember. His mouth had a stillness to it that the king of 3 years ago had not been capable of. He looked at me the way a man looks at a room he has been picturing in his head for a long time and is finally seeing. I did not invite him in. Lady Morella. He said the title carefully, as if testing whether I would refuse it. I am not a lady. You were one. You may be one again if... Your Majesty, I said. The honorific was a door closing. I am a midwife. I have a birth to attend at sundown. If you have come to this village in some official capacity, the steward's office is by the church. If you have come for any other reason, I have no answer for you. He did not move. He said, I have been looking for you for 3 years. The wrist ached. I did not lift it. I know, I said. The village has been talking. They thought you might be a debt collector. He looked at me for a long moment. His jaw tightened and then loosened, as if he had decided not to perform something he had rehearsed. He said, I will not impose. I have taken a room at the inn. I will be there until you tell me to leave, or until you tell me to come back, whichever you choose. I almost laughed. I had not expected him to give me the choice. The king of 3 years ago would have stood in the road until I came out. He would have summoned me through the village priest. He would have made it impossible to ignore him without becoming a story. This man was telling me he would be at the inn. I closed the door. I closed it, and I leaned my forehead against the wood, and I felt, for the first time in 3 years, something that was not anger and not grief. It was older than either. It was the slow, uncertain ache of a wound trying to decide whether it had finally healed wrong, or whether it could still be reset. He stayed at the inn for 11 days. He did not come to my door again. He took meals in the common room. He paid the innkeeper for a room he did not lock. He walked the village in the mornings, not searching, not summoning, just walking, the way a man walks who has finally arrived somewhere and is no longer in a hurry. The villagers began to speak to him. The blacksmith asked his help shoeing a difficult mare, and he gave it. The chandler's son asked him about northern campaigns, and he answered briefly, without pride. He drew no attention to himself. He drew, by drawing none, all of it. On the 5th day, the innkeeper's wife came to my door with a basket. She set it on my table and would not meet my eyes. He asked me to give you this. He said you would know what it was. He said if you did not want it, I should bring it back, and he would not send another. I waited until she left. I opened the basket. Inside was a logbook, leather-bound, the corners worn soft from being carried. There was nothing else. I sat down on the floor of my own kitchen because my legs would not hold me, and I opened it. It was his handwriting. I had seen it once, on a writ of permission my father had carried, and I had memorised the shape of it, the way a girl memorises things she should not be paying attention to. The first page was dated 3 years ago, the day after the ceremony. The entries were short. Place names, people questioned, leads followed and dismissed. A village near the Eastern Ridge. A healer's circuit through the river valleys. A name he had thought might be mine, that had turned out to be someone else's. A description he had given to a beater, and corrected, twice, because he kept getting the colour of my hair wrong. I read. I read for 2 hours. I sat on my kitchen floor and read 3 years of a man hunting me, in his own hand, with no flourish and no apology. And I read the way he had aged, in his own handwriting. The early entries were tight with rage. The middle ones were patient. The last year was something else. Entries that read like a man making a record of his own grief, because he no longer expected to find what he was looking for, and he wanted there to be evidence, somewhere, that he had not stopped. The last entry, dated 4 days before he arrived at my well, said, "I have been told there is a midwife in Hollowbrook with hair the colour of river clay. I am riding south. If she is not the one, I will keep riding. If she is, I will not approach her. She will approach me, or she will not, and either is hers to choose." I closed the logbook. I put it on my table. I did not return it. If you are still listening, if you have come this far with me, stay. The next part is the part I have never told anyone. Not the older midwives, not my father in his letters, not even myself in the dark. I think you should hear it from me before anyone else colours it for you. If you are with me, follow along quietly. I will tell it once. On the 8th day, I came down with the cough that had been moving through the village. It was not serious. I have nursed 3 winters of it. I knew what to do, and I did it, and on the 9th day I was back on my feet, and I went to attend a birth at the miller's house, and I came back through the square at dusk, and Lady Sigrid was waiting for me at my door. I had not seen her in 3 years. She was the noblewoman in silver. She had aged less than the king had. Her hair was the same. Her mouth was the same, set in the line of a woman who had been told, once, that she had won, and had been finding out, slowly, since, that she had not. The wolf iron pendant was at her throat. She said, "Walk with me." I said, "No." She smiled the way a noblewoman smiles when a midwife forgets her station. She said, "He has been at the inn for 9 days. Half the north knows he is here. The other half will know within the week. I have come to give you the chance to spare yourself what comes next." What comes next? "He is not a free man," she said. "He took a bond at the ceremony. That bond is mine. Whatever he believes he is doing here, the council will not recognise it. They will not recognise you. You will be a scandal, briefly, and then you will be a footnote. And then you will be a midwife in a smaller village than this one, because no woman who has been a king's diversion is welcome anywhere a wife can find her." She paused. "I am offering you a way out, before he ruins your work. Go, tonight. I will see to it that you are well placed. You will never see him again." I looked at her for a long time. I said, "He gave me a logbook." Her mouth tightened. I said, "If the bond at the ceremony had been yours, he would not have spent 3 years writing in it." She did not answer. I said, "Good evening, Lady Sigrid. Please do not come back here." And I went into my house, and I closed the door, and I waited until I heard her horse leave the village, before I let my hands begin to shake. On the 11th day, the king came to the village hall, because the village had asked him to. It was small business, a dispute over a fence between 2 farms, the kind a visiting noble can resolve in an afternoon, and a king could resolve in his sleep. He resolved it. He stayed for the rest of the afternoon, answering questions from the village council about the road tax, which he had not been asked about, but which they had been waiting 2 years to put to someone who could change it. He changed it. I watched from the back of the hall. I had not meant to be there. I had been delivering tonics. I stayed because watching him be useful in my village was unlike any image of him I had carried for 3 years. At dusk, the village gave him bread and ale in the common room of the inn. They invited everyone. They were proud of themselves. They had hosted a king. They wanted the evening to be a story they could tell. I went because not going would have been louder than going. I did not sit near him. I sat with the older midwives at the long table. He did not look at me, and the not looking was so deliberate it was almost tender. Lady Sigrid had not left the region. I did not know that at the time. I learned it afterward. She had ridden to the next village, and she had paid a cook there for a small quantity of night root, which is not a poison anyone bothers to ban because no one bothers to use it. It does not kill. It loosens the lungs in a person already coughing until they cannot draw breath. In a midwife who has been on her feet for 9 days fighting the village cough, it could pass for the cough turning bad. Night root in spiced ale tastes of nothing. She had given the cup to the innkeeper's daughter and told her it was a courtesy from the noble visitor to the lady midwife. The girl, who knew no better, brought me the cup. I lifted it. I am very lucky that I had been a midwife long enough to have learned the smell of certain herbs even when they are hidden. Night root has no taste, but it has a faint scent when warmed in ale, like wet bark. I lifted the cup, and I paused, and I lowered it, and I looked at the innkeeper's daughter, and I asked her, gently, who had given her the cup. She told me. I turned my head. Across the room, at the table near the window, where she had not been a moment before, Lady Sigrid was sitting with a glass of her own, watching me. She had come to see. I set the cup down very carefully. I stood up. The room was loud. Someone was telling a story at the far end of the table. The fire was high. No one was watching us yet. I walked across the room. I did not raise my voice. I leaned down and I spoke to her at the volume of a midwife giving instructions to a frightened mother. And I said, I know what is in the cup. The innkeeper's daughter knows you gave it to her. There are 7 witnesses at this table who saw her bring it to me. If you stand up and walk out of this inn now, I will not name you. If you do not, I will. She did not move. I waited. I waited the length of a held breath. Then I straightened, and I turned to the room, and I said, in the voice I use at a birth when the room needs to stop and listen, I would like everyone to know that Lady Sigrid of the Southern Alliance has just attempted to poison me. The room stopped. The story at the far end of the table broke off mid-sentence. The king, who had been seated 3 places down from where I was now standing, stood up very slowly. He did not look at me. He looked at Sigrid. She began to speak. She had a noblewoman's voice, and she had been raised to use it under pressure. And she began to construct the explanation that would have worked in any court in the south. The midwife was mistaken. The cup was a gift. The herbs were medicinal. The season was hard on a woman who had been ill. She was good. I could see why the council had chosen her. The king said, sit down. Sigrid sat. He said, bring me the cup. The innkeeper brought him the cup. He smelled it. He set it down. He said, in the same voice he had used at the village hall that afternoon, Lady Sigrid of the Southern Alliance, you are charged with attempted murder of a healer under the protection of the Iron Crown. You will be held under guard until the council can convene. The bond you wear at your throat is annulled by your own hand tonight. He turns to the steward at the door. Remove the pendant. She lifted her hand to her own throat first. She unfastened it herself. She set it on the table between them, and she stood, and she walked out under guard, and she did not look at me once. The room was silent for a long time. The king turned to me. He said, quietly, are you hurt? I said no. He said, may I see your wrist? I did not know how he knew. I had told no one. I held out my left wrist, where the bond mark had once burned itself raw and left a faint white line that never fully closed. He took my hand carefully, as a healer takes a hand. He looked at the line. He did not touch it. He said, it is open again. It has been open since I walked into the square. I said, I know. He said, The bond is alive. It survived the rejection. It has been waiting. I said, I know. He said, and his voice was no longer the king's voice. It was the voice of a man at the end of a 3-year ride. I do not deserve to ask, but I am asking. Will you let me reseal it? The room was very quiet. I looked at him. I thought about the chapel. I thought about the morning I'd stopped praying. I thought about the woman I'd become in the years he had been searching, who had not been built to be a Luna, and who was now a thing he had not earned. I thought about Sigrid being led out, and the logbook on my kitchen table, and the village hall that afternoon, and the way he had stepped back on the dais 3 years ago, because he had been frightened of what his wolf had just chosen. I thought, you are not the woman he turned away. You are the one she became. You may answer for both of you, but you do not have to. I said, on 3 conditions. He waited. I said, you will say, in front of this room, what you did 3 years ago. You will name it. You will not euphemize it. I rejected my fated mate in front of the pack of the Iron Territories, because I was afraid of how much I wanted her, and I let a council put a pendant on the wrong woman to spare myself the cost. There is no version of this where I was right. I have known that since the morning after, and I have spent 3 years failing to find her so I could tell her. The room did not breathe. I said, second, you will not ask me to be Luna. If I choose it, I will choose it. You will not bring it to me as a bargain. I will not. I said, third, the villagers here have been good to me. Whatever happens between us, you will not take this place from them, or them from this place. The road tax stays where you set it today. The midwife trade is unchanged. Hollowbrook does not lose anything because the king was once in it. He almost smiled. He did not quite. He said, agreed. I held out my wrist. He took it. He set his own wrist against mine, not closing the distance, only resting bone to bone, the way the old rituals describe, the bond's path open between us. He did not say my name. He did not have to. The bond resealed the way a bone resets, with one clean wrench of cold through me, a moment where the breath left me entirely and the room narrowed to the size of his face, and then a warmth I have not felt in 3 years, settling somewhere deep in me, like a coal returning to a banked hearth. I closed my eyes. When I opened them, he had let my hand go. He was waiting. I said, sit down. You look terrible. The room laughed. He sat down. He looked at me. He said, you have not lost your tongue. I said, I have not lost anything you can return. I have just decided to let you carry 1 or 2 things. He bowed his head once, slightly, the way a king bows to a council he has chosen to respect. It is 6 months later. I am writing this in the small chamber off the king's library, which used to belong to a steward who has been reassigned. The window looks out over the gardens. The gardens are full again. Torvald walked through them for the first time in years on the morning after the council recognised the resealing, and the gardeners are taking it as instruction. The fortress is loud. There is more bread baking than there used to be. The kitchens have hired a 4th assistant. I do not know all the staff yet. They are patient with me. I am not Luna. I have not chosen it yet. The council has stopped asking. I will choose it when the choice is mine, and not before, and Torvald has not once raised the subject. He has, however, asked me 3 times this month if there is anything I want changed about the chamber. Lady Sigrid is in the southern keep. Her family no longer commands. Her father has formally apologised. The council has, quietly and on its own initiative, removed 2 other names from the long lists they keep for moments like the autumn ceremony. I had a letter from my father last week. He is well. He writes carefully, like a man who does not know yet whether to be proud or afraid for me. I have written back to tell him both are reasonable, and that he should come for the winter solstice, and that he should bring his satchel, because the fortress healer is older than he is and will be glad of the help. I keep the logbook in a drawer in my chamber. Torvald does not know I still have it. He may guess. I read it sometimes, on nights when the bond is too quiet, and I want to remember what the silence cost him. It is the only ledger I have ever kept of a man's love, and I expect it will be the last. The wolf iron pendant, the original, is in a small box in the same drawer. The council returned it to me after Sigrid surrendered it. I have not yet put it on. I will, one day, in front of the courtyard, on a moon I choose, when I am ready to be a thing other than the woman who walked past him at the well. I used to pray he would come back. Then I stopped praying, and I started leaving. Now I am the one who stays. Not because he asked, because I chose this room, and this window, and this grey-eyed man who walks the gardens in the morning as if he is testing whether the world will still hold him. It does. So, if you have come this far with me, tell me. Did you see in the courtyard 3 years ago what I could not? Did you know what he was before I did? Leave it in the comments. I would like to hear from you. And if this story stayed with you, follow along. There are more nights at this fortress, and I am only beginning to learn how to tell them. I will be here. Stay warm.